Hey everyone, time for another video. Before we start talking about the video, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all my recent subscribers. So in like the past, I don't know, like month or so, I've had 5 new subscribers. And it doesn't sound like a lot, you know, especially when you consider, you know, other big YouTubers like Philip DeFranco or Dennis Daly, you know, some of those channels that have thousands of viewers. But you know what? 20 subscribers, I feel like each of you was very, very hard won. I really appreciate everyone who watches my videos and, you know, comments and likes and subscribes. You know, I appreciate every one of you. You know, I remember when I had like 1 subscriber, I don't even know who it was. It was probably like my sister. But now I got 20 and people are watching, and I just really appreciate people taking the time to watch the videos. I do spend a lot of time, you know, not just reading the books, but thinking about the books and taking notes and you know, really trying to create good videos for you, you know. And you see I'm sitting in my garage. I don't have any makeup on, you know. I happen to glance at like a couple of other book reviewers, and you know, they're all like really, you know, nicely made up and nicely dressed, and they're in these stark white rooms that look beautiful. You know, and I don't do that. I try to keep it really low key. First off, you know, I'm a mom with 2 kids, so you know, I don't bother, you know, with anything that's not comfortable. But I really want to keep these videos about the books themselves. You know, it's not about me. It's not about how beautiful my house is or is not. It's really about the books. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you've referred me to friends or shared my videos, thank you. Thank you so much. Now on to the actual book. This week we are talking about Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. So I heard about this book on NPR, and it was really kind of intriguing to me because it's basically kind of like a grown-up Scooby-Doo. It is based on the Scooby-Doo story scheme, you know, the summer teenage detectives, and you know, at the end it's always like, you know, a middle-aged guy in a mask or an old guy in a mask. You know, it's never actually a monster. But this is kind of like the Scooby-Doo gang grown up. The average Goodreads rating was 3.8. I gave it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. If you grew up watching Scooby-Doo like I did, you're either going to love this book or hate it. You know, you're either going to appreciate how he took the Scooby-Doo story and really kind of ran with it and made it more adult, or you're going to resent what he did with the characters. And you know, spoiler alert, at the end it is not just, you know, a man in a mask. So you may not like what he did with it. But I will discuss, there were a lot of things that I came to like with it. So Meddling Kids is about the last case of the Blighton Hills Summer Detective Club. Really kind of haunted them. It simultaneously propelled these teenagers to local fame, but also broke them mentally. And, you know, some time goes by, the bad guy from their last case, Mr. Wickley, was sent to prison, and he eventually is released on parole after 13 years. And one of the people from the group, Andy, first off, she goes to confront him, but then she decides we have to go back to the mansion. In the 13 years since the last case, the Peter, who is kind of like this version of Fred from Scooby-Doo, in that time he has become a big Hollywood star, and he ends up dying of an overdose, and that also kind of tears the group apart. So they are really going back to Blighton Hills to figure out what exactly it was they saw that night that really broke them as a group and individually, mentally, emotionally. There are a lot of similar antics in terms of comparing it to the original Scooby-Doo story. For instance, Nate, who is kind of like the Shaggy of the group, he is in a mental institution, and he is bounced around from mental institution to mental institution because he's been hallucinating, and he sees Peter / Fred, he's in the bathroom washing his hands, and he sees Peter walk out of the bathroom stall. Peter sits next to him in the back seat and is talking to him, and like, Peter, even though he's dead, is a very real character in this novel. But anyway, getting back to the antics. In the beginning, when they're trying to break Nate out of the psychiatric ward, they have this stunt called Werewolf, where essentially the Scooby of the gang, whose name is Tim in this book, they get him to drag him out, literally like tear him out of the ward on a rolling chair all the way down to the parking lot. And just reading through the descriptions, like, I can totally see that in an episode of Scooby-Doo. So, really quick, I've already kind of mentioned some of the character correlations, but let me actually go through the character correlations, or else the rest of this video is just going to be me constantly, like, bouncing back and forth, and it's going to get really annoying really quick. Okay, so the 4 main characters are Andy, Carrie, Peter, and Nate. Andy she's a weird amalgam of different characters for this book. The original Scooby-Doo gang, they were all, your typical white teenagers. And I guess it was kind of suggested, hinted, assumed that they were all straight. Well, Andy is your Latin American Hispanic lesbian. So that's kind of interesting. And she's less the brains of the group and more the tomboy. So why do I consider her the Velma? Well, because Carrie is kind of the brains of Velma with the looks of Daphne. So, Carrie is, she was going to be this marine biologist, and she was going to be, all these really great things, and she got sidetracked, and she suffers from nightmares now, night terrors, and, just horrible things. But she really is, she's the book smart of the group, whereas Andy is the tactical smarts of the group. She's tried to join the military and gotten kicked out, and she's been in and out of jail. So she's more the tactical smarts, and Carrie is the book smart. Peter is your Fred character. He's the good-looking one. He's the jock, the handsome, movie star looks. And it's kind of funny, at one point, Nate mentions, like, dude, you're still wearing bell-bottoms. And he does, in the 13 years from the last case, he does end up overdosing in an LA hotel room. So, he becomes sort of a comic relief in some ways, but also, I don't know, kind of like a third-person commentary on everything. So, and we'll kind of get into another part. Like, I can't decide what Peter is exactly, but we'll discuss that in a little bit. And then Nate really is your Shaggy character. There's less that suggestion. My husband has a t-shirt that says what happens in the van stays in the van, and it's a picture of the mystery machine. And there's always that suggestion that, they did pod and Shaggy was the pothead or whatever. There's less of that suggestion with Nate, and it's just he's very emotionally, mentally, I don't know, he's an interesting case. He bounces in and out of mental hospitals, whether or not he necessarily needs to, but he spends a lot of time there. He's very big into Dungeons and Dragons and more supernatural paranormal type studies. So he's a very interesting character. He's probably my second favorite character behind Peter. So, but and then there's Tim, who's a dog, who is actually Tim is the grandson of the original dog, and I think his name was Sean. I didn't write it down, but he's I don't know how to say this word. Weimaraner, Weimaraner, like big dog. So he's that. But he kind of rounds out the group. And he is his own character as well. And we'll kind of get writing style-wise some examples of that. But it's kind of cool. Tim ends up having his own personality as well. Kind of like Scooby did. Like I said, Peter was kind of my favorite character. Sorry, it's like 100 degrees in Florida today, and I'm sitting here in my hot, stale garage. So Peter was, like I said, was my favorite. He was simultaneously hilarious and scary, like really very scary. For example, let me say 67. So once they get the gang together, they're on their way to Blighton Hills. It's a cross-country drive. And because of Andy's criminal history, she can't get on a plane, so they have to drive. So they take a night and stay in this motel. And Nate is hallucinating Peter. He's in his own room. And he and Peter are going back and forth. And he's like, what did you call Carrie about before you died? And, they're going back and forth about, whether or not Peter is a figment of Nate's imagination or a manifestation of his subconscious or, what he is. And Peter's saying, I'm a figment of your subconscious, so what could I possibly know about Peter's life, Peter's death, blah, blah, blah. And Nate says, shut up. And Peter says, what could I know about the cold? Like your body naked and buried in the snow, the infinite cold gripping you, burning you, numbing you, seeping through your pores, frostbiting your muscles, killing the marrow in your bones. About dirt being shoveled over your lips and nostrils. About centipedes scuttling into your ears and gnawing the insides. About maggots living in your body, growing fat, eating their way out. About gigantic godworms sleeping in the center of the earth, curled up miles and miles of a single primordial thing that will devour your house with you in it and let you sink into the unspeakable sickness of your gut, Nate. You and Andy and your beautiful cousin burning alive in hell. And it's just like, it's frightening. And like the worst line is this next page. Nate reached the light switch before Peter's slithering hand reached him. It was still Peter, eyeless, rotten, worms pouring out of his mouth. It will kill you all. Like, that's scary. That is flippin' scary. But at the same time, why did I not write down any samples of hilariousness? He has like really good one-liners too. So, and he's like constantly just nagging at Nate. Which sometimes is hilarious, sometimes is not, but anyway. So the writing style really kind of bounces around. Sometimes it's like your typical, paragraph, dialogue, paragraph. Sometimes it's like that, and then other times it switches to kind of like a script, like Nate, blah, blah, blah. Carrie, blah, blah, blah. Like you're reading a script, and then he'll have like italicized, kind of like stage movements, like she sucks on her lollipop, grinning around it, and it's, I don't know, it's kind of like when I described reading chemistry, where I can't figure out why it works, but it works. Same thing in this instance. You would think it would be jarring and it'd be really annoying, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I felt like in some places it really kind of emphasized the point, and especially when it's switched to script form or whatever, I felt like it definitely gave that callback to the Scooby-Doo sort of story. You felt like you were back there, and you know, it really added that extra description to it. Let me see. And the one thing I was kind of nervous about, especially like as I saw that this was going to be in some ways more serious, and it was going to have like serious full-on fight scenes, was, okay, how is he going to handle this? And he actually did really, really well with it. The paragraphs ended up being like really, really long. Like, I don't know if you can see. Let me see. Okay, so this is the beginning of the description of a fight scene. This is one entire paragraph, and it goes on to the next page. And towards the end, it's just one long run-on sentence of descriptions. I mean, I'm trying to find the beginning of the sentence. I think this entire paragraph is one long sentence. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it sounds like this particular fight scene description reminds me of, you know, the old guys who would sit around and, you know, embellish stories. Oh, you should have seen me. It was a right and a left and a right hook and da-da-da. You know, whatever. That's what this reminds me of. She feels it, lungs wolfing down oxygen, heart pumping at drill speed, muscles overdosing, brain ordering, and dash to the left, stab to the right, kick to the stomach, elbow at 4 o'clock, come back through the jugular, triple gut, combo, ahead, bonus, 10,000 for style, slice the neck, bash the head, nail the hand, twist inside, eviscerate, decapitate, mutilate, amputate, cut it, hack it, stab it, kill it, die. And I can't say the rest of it or else YouTube will censor me. So you can imagine what he says. But it's just very, you know, it's just like, you can see it happening, but it's not a burden to read. So I actually really, from a writing style perspective, I really admired his ability to do that. So good on you. And then I wrote down, what was on page 311? Oh yeah, so he also has these descriptions that, on one hand, kind of drive the point home, but on the other hand, it's kind of like an inside joke. For instance, they walked down to the first morning after the apocalypse. A day the head just barged in, sweaty and unkempt like a late commuter, asking, anything happened while I was out? A lazy rain began to wash out the defiled streets, all casual and gleeful, like a late authority figure at the end of a teen detective story. You know, so it's just like, it's lines like that you're like, haha, very funny. You know, but it's interesting, it's fun, it's fun, you know? Now I marked this other page. What's this other page for? Here's that line I mentioned about the bell bottoms. You know, just these, you know, these interactions back and forth. So, you know, I mentioned Nate is hallucinating and he goes in and out of mental hospitals. Well, he's on pills for the hallucinations. Peter kept observing him closely, slightly off balance. What are those for? He said. Hallucinations. Really? What are you seeing? Right now? A moron who still wears bell-bottoms. Do you think a pill is just going to make me puff away? Because I'm warning you, it took like 30 pills lifetime to make me puff away. So it's, you know, it's, you know, one-liners and descriptions and, you know, it's things like that really made me enjoy this book. You know, it's little links between actions and key story points. So I really enjoyed it. So some of the wrap-ups, I gotta admit that I was, I simultaneously was happy and not happy with some of the wrap-ups. So for instance, with Peter, you know, a couple times throughout the story, there's a question of, you know, Peter called Carrie before he died. And she was out clubbing, and she said, I'll call you back. And she was drunk, and she never called him back. And the next she heard, he was dead. So the question keeps popping up throughout the book. What did he call to say to her? You know, and in the beginning of the book, when Nate and Peter are going back and forth about, you know, you're not real, you're a fragment, you're this, that, some other thing, whatever. he says, well, fine, what did you call Carrie to tell her? And Peter says, I called to say that I loved her. And he said, essentially, no, you didn't. That's what I think Peter would say, so that's why you're saying it. But then later on, and spoiler alert, one of the creepiest things about this book is the Peter's reanimated body makes an appearance later in the book. And it's like the creepiest thing ever. But one of the cool things, closure-wise, when the group sees him, Carrie starts freaking out. Oh my God. And she calls to the body and says, Peter, what did you call to tell me? And the reanimated Peter says, I'm sorry. So I thought that was, it was a nice touch. I really, it's one of those little heartstring moments, like, bing! It gives you the feels. But in terms of closure, I was also kind of disappointed. Like, I was curious what happened to Mr. Wiggly. Like, in the beginning, and thinking about it, they probably brought him in kind of like as an added description and background piece. But I was really kind of disappointed because I was curious what happened to Mr. Wiggly after he got out of prison. He kind of had to fight a little bit for a pardon and prove that he wasn't going to be a threat to the kids. And then after Andy roughs him up in the bathroom, like, we don't hear from him again. So I was kind of disappointed in that, but, that's just me. I also thought it was kind of cool. One of the things about this novel is that it does break that fourth wall. So I mentioned the one scene, or the one description about, the late wandering in authority figure in a teen detective story. There's two other examples I wrote down. 212. Oh, here we go. Nate and Andy are going back and forward. Really, Nate frowned, thinking what that implied, but his cache memory was too busy, blah, blah, blah. Wiggly just pleaded guilty, Andy said. He told me. Nate looked at her for the first time in this chapter. Like, literally, that's what it says. So, that was, that threw me off a little bit, but then it made me laugh. And then the other part... Oh, it's right here. A single bile covered Weezer, blah, blah, blah. It heard the girls crash landing into the coal pile behind, scrambling to face them, and had its head blown into subatomic matter, thus starting and ending its overall contribution to the story in one paragraph. So, just another one of those, like, haha, this is a book, so, that was kind of cool. So, my last card is Peter real or not? So, again, you have Nate and Peter going back and forth in the beginning about, are you real, are you not? No, you're not. Yes, I am. How do you know? Da-da-da, whatever. And then later on at some point, Nate becomes convinced that, no, you are a figment of my imagination, and he actually switches to calling Peter Pete. And even Peter's like, oh, it's Pete now, huh? So the entire time you're never entirely sure, because in some ways, the way the story plays out, the things he says, it does seem like, yeah, you are just a figment of his imagination. You must be. Nate says, you only know the things I think you know, or you only know the things I know you know. And that plays out in some ways, so you're like, oh yeah, it must be a figment of his imagination. But then there are other things that happen that you're like, maybe he's not. So I'm not really sure, because, let me see. There's one point where the way Peter speaks, at one point Peter's whispering as they're kind of creeping around the island, and Nate says, you don't have to whisper, I'm the only one listening to you. It's not I'm the only one who can hear you, it's I'm the only one listening to you, suggesting that, okay, maybe he's there and others would have the potential to hear him, but they're not looking for him or they can't hear him for whatever reason. So things like that, you're like, okay, I don't know, maybe he's actually real. And then at the end, Peter just kind of disappears too. So you don't entirely get closure on Peter either. Like, after everything goes down, they destroy the house and everything. Peter just kind of disappears from the story, and you could take that one of two ways. You could take it as, you know, the unresolved history that was eating at Nate is now resolved, so Peter's role in his subconscious is done, so he can be packed away. Or Peter really is a ghost. He was egging Nate this entire time to try to get him to help resolve this issue so he could have peace, especially because, as it turns out, his body was dug up and reanimated, so theoretically he's not at rest. But now that the story has been resolved, Peter's ghost can now rest. But even in that case, even if you wanted to say, okay, yeah, it's the ghost story and Peter's not at rest because his body's been disturbed, Peter didn't know his body was disturbed. Because if you look at page 262, the first time the necromancer really, you know, the presumed necromancer, really shows his face, and you see that it's Peter, you know, Peter's, you know, ghost spirit visage, he says, okay, this is awkward. Like, it's clear he didn't know, you know, and if he did, he's playing dumb. So, you know, that was one thing that, you know, it kind of bugged me, and it still kind of bugs me a little bit that I don't know, but I don't know if it's one of those intentionally left-hanging threads or what, but, you know, that's the story. So, I did really enjoy this book. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I was just making sure I had no more notes. You know, there were just those 1 or 2 things that bothered me. You know, the closure with Peter and the closure with Mr. Wickley. You know, I personally wish I had more closure on that. But otherwise, I really, really enjoyed the book. There's a lot of things that I didn't get into in this video. You know, I mentioned that Andy is a lesbian, and she, you know, she really likes Carrie, and, you know, they kind of go back and forth, so you get kind of that romantic, long history, angsty type situation going on. So there were a couple scenes there where I was kind of like, you know, but even there, it was, I won't say it was weird reading it, because it wasn't necessarily weird, it was just, I wasn't necessarily anticipating that or prepared for that in this book. Like, I was ready to get into the story and less of the side, like, I'm a lesbian, you never do, you know, why did you leave, oh, I'm not into girls, you could be, you know, like that type thing. So I wasn't really prepared for that. It wasn't bad, it was just, okay. But otherwise, I generally enjoyed it. So that is my review for Meddling Kids. Go read it. I do highly recommend it. New release. And I'll try to remember to include the link to the NPR interview with the author in the comments below, or in the description below. So hit me. I cannot talk today. Hit me up. Hit like. Hit subscribe. Hit subscribe to see more videos like this. In the meantime, I'm going to get inside and get a drink of water. It is stinking hot. I hope you all are staying cool, stay hydrated, and next video I'm anticipating is probably going to be The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. I read her first book, The Woman in Cabin 10. I loved it, and as soon as I saw that she had a second book coming out, I went out and bought it. So look for that review. It will probably be my next review. Also, my last video, In the Absence of Sun. I mentioned that that was a sequel of sorts to Still Life with Rice by Healy Lee, and I hadn't read it yet. Actually, the day that I posted that video, Still Life with Rice arrived in the mail. So I will be reading that sometime soon as well. So you got a couple videos lined up coming from me. Hit subscribe if you want to be notified when those videos are posted. Otherwise, hit me up in the comments. If you read Meddling Kids, tell me what you thought. If you watched Scooby-Doo, tell me who your favorite character was. I love Shaggy and Scooby. I hated Scrappy-Doo. I wanted to, like, freaking... I hate Scrappy-Doo so much. But, tell me what you thought of the book. Tell me what you're reading. Tell me what you recommend. And until next time, viewers, stay cool. It is way too freaking hot out. Have a good one, okay?